Yeah, hey guys. Yeah, no, this is the second episode of the Rugby recap. Of course, to my left we have the Kiwi lads. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, mate. Slightly sleep deprived from the long weekend of rugby. We did the all-nighter with the Rugby Championship, but it was worth it. Although those games, a little bit different from what we predicted, weren't they?
Oh, 100%, 100%. But yeah, mine. We'll give you guys pretty much our review throughout throughout both games involving the Rugby Championship. And kind of just give you our takes in terms of what we think, what we saw, from both games, what can be improved on, maybe going into the second round. But yeah, I mean, first of all, I mean, just in terms of like, I guess, like, what do you think overall of both games? So we'll start off with the Box and Wallabies game. Like, what do you think overall of that game?
Well, I said in the last podcast, the live version, I said I wanted to see two close games of the Rugby Championship. That was one of my final points that I made on that stream. And there were 31 points difference in one of those contests and 29 points difference in the other. In the Wallabies versus Springboks game, fair play to the Wallabies. They got the first and the last try. Unfortunately, though, conceding so many points in the middle is what dearly cost them. But the Springboks, they just looked like they had picked up right where they left off in terms of that form. Like, they're going to be a hard side to beat heading towards that Rugby World Cup. And, New Zealand just around the corner. It's going to be that big question of who played better, do you think? The Springboks over Australia or New Zealand over the Argentines? Because I feel like maybe it was the Box. I know New Zealand had a very good first half, but then in that second half, it seemed like the ABs just lost that little bit of momentum.
Interesting. The thing is that because I was actually having this conversation literally, I don't know, like an hour ago with my dad, just asking, what do you think about both games and who do you think was just better control? And he also said the Box, but I really thought the most dominant display of each half. I mean, I think the All Blacks' first half was probably the most dominant display, I'd say, out of any half I saw within round one. But I guess if you're talking about it on a whole, then yes, I think the Box maybe were more control, I think, throughout the whole game. So it does make sense. And again, you have to keep in mind that the Bucks were actually playing the Wallabies in Pretoria. So again, they did have home advantage, but you can make the case maybe that the Wallabies are a stronger side, maybe than Argentina. I mean, it's pretty close. I mean, really between the two actually. So it's a tough argument to say who's kind of, I don't know, who was seen as, I don't know, that for, because I think most people would have said the Bucks and All Blacks are kind of the favorites to win the Rugby Championship, but the third team is really kind of up for debate, really. So I guess like the All Blacks to win away in Argentina was pretty impressive overall as well. But yeah, I mean, look, in terms of I think the Bucks Wallabies game, from my perspective, I think it really was just a very dominant display, I think, from the Bucks overall. They really just controlled the game straight from the start. I mean, they got the tries they scored were actually pretty. I mean, I'm not going to say there was a really nice try. I mean, in the way that where they really they kept pressuring the Wallabies, just kept pressuring their defense, and then from there just found the open space in the left wing, and just that was kind of like what they had throughout the whole game. And it was good tries they scored, but it wasn't anything like what I saw within the other game, which was like the All Blacks Pumas game, because I think a lot of their tries are a bit kind of like executed better in terms of like going around the back line, inside passes, and all that. We didn't really see that. It was just more like just pass it out wide, and there was no numbers. It really just a kind of tackle the players. So I think the Bucks did pretty well in terms of sucking the defense. I think they definitely did very well in that department. But in terms of scoring like a remarkable try, I mean, it was just really what you kind of expected in terms of the Bucks, just to kind of just get power through you and then get those tries on the board. But yeah, I mean, in terms of I guess like the players really just for this game, like what do you think? Like, were there who are the players that really stood out, you could say, for this game in general?
I think Kurtley Arinsa, he definitely stepped up for the Springboks in this game. Andre Esterhuizen as well. In the midfield, I feel like that was probably something a majority of Springbok supporters wanted to see, was just in case there is anything that happens to Damien Dialende, we've still got an option. And I think Andre Esterhuizen, he's put his hand up and said, I can be that guy to slot in that number 12 jersey. And I'm curious to know next week up against the All Blacks whether they do decide to go with maybe the Jesse Creel at number 13, Damien Dialende at number 12, just to give them all a crack. Although I do see Lukanyuam and Andre Esterhuizen both travelling to New Zealand. So, yeah, it will be interesting to see who they actually go with in that midfield combination. The Box forward pack, though, they were just showing throughout those scrums. Like, I don't think I've seen a Wallaby scrum dominated the way that they were in this game. Like Alan Alatoa was flattening out every single scrum. And that was just that pure pressure from Stephen Kitsoff. And also Malharba on the other side, he was doing well. So it's going to be a hard side to beat, like I said. But I think that there were a lot of individuals who worked well in the team environment. And that probably made the coaches very happy because now they know they've got a couple of decent, viable options in the future that could work well and gel quite quickly.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with your points there. I mean, I really do think from a Springbok perspective, Kirby Lorenzo was definitely the standout player. I mean, with a hat trick of tries, I mean, he has to be obviously the standout. But do agree that Andre Esterhuizen had a very good game for the Boks and definitely raised his hand, like you said, in terms of, I guess, making a name for himself and kind of just saying, I'm here if you need me. I'm here to back up Damien Delende because, again, he could even start, if you need him to. I mean, if there's an injury towards Damien Delende, he kind of just showed within throughout that game, I have the ability to kind of power through defenses, gain a few meters in the process, find the offload if needed. Even the kick he had at one point where he caught his own ball. But I think he had a really impressive game. I thought. If there was another, I'm trying to think. Was there another play that stood out? I mean, it was really them two. I kind of saw throughout the whole game. But I guess if I had to mention, I did like Matty Limbolk. I thought he was very impressive throughout the game. He was close to getting his first try, but again, it was ruled out unfortunately for him. But I did like the combination play of him and Willie LaRue because I think that worked out really well actually, and it's something which they can definitely utilize. I think going into the World Cup because I wouldn't be shocked if that's used within one of the kind of like the group stage games actually. So I can definitely see that as a possibility for sure. And if they need to, that can be like kind of like an impact play that they have in terms of like the I don't know if they needed take Andre Pollard off or even put him at the 12 and you can put Manny Libok there at the 10 and I don't know, do something with that. So overall, I thought it was pretty impressive. I thought about the displays from a Springbok perspective. I guess in terms of the Wallabies, were there any players that stood out for you in this game? I mean, it's hard to come by because it was a big margin, but were there any players that kind of stood out?
So for the Wallabies side, I would say that even though he didn't touch the ball a huge amount, Marika Korombeti did look very strong out on that left wing. Like the way that he was able to run in that first try, I was heavily expecting to see a Springbok defender in front of him, but it was only Andre Esterhuizen who was putting in the chase. And that was actually due to the Springboks. They had Moody a little bit further on the inside. Billy LaRue also had gone in. And then Marika Korombeti saw the space on the outside and made the most of it. Other than him, though, it's relatively tricky to pick a few of those Wallabies players who did have good games. I feel like Samu Karevi, he had a little bit of impact when he came off the bench, although he did concede a penalty straight away. But I think that was the summary of the Wallabies game is anything that could go wrong did go wrong for them when it came to dropping that ball. Quade Cooper and Nick White, it was as if the two were speaking completely different languages. They just didn't seem to be able to communicate. I'm trying to think of a forward, Valentini. I wouldn't have even known he was out there on the field. Like, I hardly saw the man, and he's normally got the haircut that makes him stand out like a sore thumb. But Skelton, he had 2 runs.
Yeah, exactly. The thing is that there wasn't really a standout player, you could say, from a Wally perspective. I mean, for me, this might be kind of a generous thing to say, by the way, guys, but I know he was only introduced in the last 10 minutes, but I mean, I liked when I got to see Carter Gordon play because at least he kind of acted, he gave a bit of energy towards the side, at least for the last 10, and obviously got a try for himself as well. So I guess I was happy for him because, he's had a very impressive season, for the Rebels, and he's kind of carried that now on into the Wallabies side. So I guess from that perspective, I was pretty, a Wallaby fan should definitely be happy from that point of view because, he's the future. I really do think he's the future 10 for the Wallabies. And we got to see what they kind of looked at with, Ted McDermott at the 9, him at 10. So, yeah, I mean, from that perspective, I think it was pretty cool to see. But yeah, like you said, there wasn't really kind of a standout player, you could say, from the Wallaby side. But I mean, I guess what do you say in terms of the lessons to be learned? You can say from this game. I mean, for both sides, really. Like, do you think there was lessons? Because I think at the end of the day, I think there's always going to be a lesson to be learned from both sides. So, what do you say first from maybe from a Wallaby perspective this time? Because I think there's more you can say from that. What would you say?
So I know for the Wallabies, Eddie Jones has said that they have got plenty that they can work on. First of all, that's scrummaging. He thinks that will be one of the keys, and also their set piece. And I think he's not far off the truth there. But the other thing we've got to remember is this is the first game we've seen Eddie Jones coach Australia, which I think some people are slightly forgetting. They've got to remember Rome wasn't built in a day.
Exactly.
Jones isn't going to fix the Wallabies in one performance. Definitely not when you're taking on a box side that played the way that they did. Like, you look at all those other coaches who have recently come in. Borthwick, first loss. Gatlin, first loss. There's still going to be that time. And I think it's what he does from here over the next 12 months or so that's really going to show what Eddie Jones can do as a coach, because we've seen what he's done with lower ranked teams. We've seen what he did with Japan. England, I still think that maybe they threw him away a bit too early, definitely with that World Cup just around the corner. I think it's going to put a huge amount of pressure on Borthwick. But for Australia, I think just getting those passes right early on in the contest, like they started well, first 10 minutes, it looked like it was going to be a relatively close affair, and they actually scored the first try with Marika Koromberi. But then from there, it just continuously had those little moments going wrong, whether it was dropping the ball or being out of position. So for the Wallabies in their next game up against Argentina, after seeing what Argentina did in the second half up against the All Blacks, I think that game could be relatively close. In fact, at the moment, some would even say, even with it being in Australia, Argentina might come in as slight favourites.
Ooh. Okay, I like that. But yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with you in terms, I guess, like the lessons to be learned from Australia. I mean, like you said at the very beginning, I think really the set piece is probably the main area which they need to work on going into that Argentinian game, because I mean the Pumas are actually good within the set piece. Like they're normally to be good in that area. Again, like you could probably say we'll talk more about this when we talk about the other game, but I mean you can see from the lineouts, from the Pumas' perspective, it wasn't really at their best as what the the All Blacks were just pressuring him, literally the whole time. So maybe that's something which like the Wallabies can definitely kind of learn a lesson from, and definitely be like, okay, we need to target really the lineouts maybe going into this game. But yeah, I think overall, I mean, they got to get more possession in their hands as well. They have to have more chances, kind of like just playmakers really to kind of get their chance to really just get their side of the field really. But I mean, I'm trying to think. I mean, you could say even from the breakdown. I mean, again, they just didn't have a lot of possession, so they weren't able to kind of win the ball a lot within the breakdown as well. I mean, I can only remember like 2 times I think in the game. I think it was like Michael Hooper won one for them. I mean, yeah, I mean, there's not really a lot of things you can say from the lessons that we learned. I mean, I guess you could say from a defensive point of view, they did stop 2 tries actually going over the line. So I guess they've done well in that way. But yeah, again, you don't want to be in that situation anyway. So yeah, they just got to keep up working on that. But I guess from a Springbok perspective, I'll go first on this. I mean, there's not really a lot you could say in terms of what they need to work on, because they really just they played their hearts out really in this game, and they really just nailed a lot of the kind of like the criteria and what you need to win a game in. Their set piece was great throughout the game. I mean, I guess you can maybe make the argument where the scrum at times, like they got kind of like told that they were kind of going too early within the scrum, so they can maybe just make sure that their timing is just a bit better in that sense. But I mean, I guess the playmaking was really good. I mean, they really utilized their backs. I mean, they used the wide wing as well a lot, I thought, within the game. I'm trying to think. Like the kicking was good. I mean, yeah, there's not really one I can think of. I mean, what would you say in terms of lessons we learned for the Boks?
I mean, if you had to pick anything for the Springboks, which is relatively hard to do, of course, there'll be the little things that they'd like to work on. They did kick the ball out on the full a few times throughout this game, so maybe that's something that it's a little bit of a risk and reward scenario, though, isn't it? Because the majority of the time when that ball went out on the full, it was for a little chip in behind or a cross kick, which if they pay off, could have been very useful for the Boks. Rolling maul, they didn't quite get as much dominance there as I thought that they might have, for a side that have scored the most rolling maul tries out of any since 2022. So they might look at that as just a little tiny thing they'd like to improve on. But I think that the Wallabies overall, other than, of course, Dave Parecki at the end when he dragged down that rolling maul, I mean, I think the Wallabies defended it relatively well. But then the Springboks, with the fact that their backline was firing the way that it was, they didn't really need to go to that rolling maul. Once that ball came out to Kobus Raina, found the passing option, and in fact, for one of them, actually sniped around the side of the rolling maul, which was a pretty awesome sight to see. Yeah, I think there'll be little things for the Boks, but nothing too major. They'll just want to make sure that they're bringing that physicality next week up against the All Blacks, making sure that they try and get the All Blacks on the back foot in the breakdown, and then from there, just get that go forward ball.
Yeah, no, some good points there. Very good points indeed. Yeah, I think that's kind of. I mean, is there anything else? I mean, I guess like we can talk about really just more what we expect in terms of like going forward now, going into round two. Like, do you think there'll be a few changes? I guess in terms of both these sides. Like, what would you say in terms of I guess for both the Boks and the Wallabies?
Well, the Box, I think we're going to see almost a whole new team up
Yeah,
against the All Blacks, with the exception of a few players who have carried over. I know that they've brought 21 players from South Africa over to New Zealand. A couple of the players who missed out, Joseph Dweber, and then also Evan Ruiz, actually another player who
yeah,
they
big
didn't
call.
decide to bring over. So I think we're going to see probably pretty much a whole new backline with some of the players that have been missing, such as a Mapimpi, such as Cheslin Colby. They might still go with Willie LaRue at number 15,
Yeah,
unless I'm thinking maybe the reason that they didn't play Damien Valimza in this game is because they might be saving him. Possibly they could give him the fullback jersey next week up against the All Blacks
and
and
then
give
what? Go
Marnie
with like
Libok the
Libel number
10.
10.
Just an
Yeah,
idea. It
think
just
so.
seems
Think so.
weird that they didn't decide to give him a chance off the bench in this
Yeah.
game and instead just left him there waiting. So surely that's tactical. I don't think they would have not played him other than to rest him for next week. It's just the question
Exactly.
of what role is he going to play in next week's fixture.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I mean, what would you say from them from a Wally perspective? Like, what can they do? You think their team may switch a bit, or do you think they kind of will stick with the same team?
This is where Eddie Jones has a big. I think I'm lagging again one moment. This is where Eddie Jones, I think, has a big decision to make because he's got to decide, does he stick with the players that he had in this game roughly and see whether or not they can build up a bit of momentum, or does he make a few switches? I think the loose forward trio, Pete Samu for me has got to start, mainly because when he did come on the field for Tom Hooper, he did seem that little bit stronger. I'm a little bit disappointed that Fraser McRoy is nowhere to be seen at the moment because
Yeah,
I
it's
don't
crazy.
believe he's injured. But last year in the Rugby Championship, he was slightly the Box kryptonite, wasn't he? Because he was
Yeah, he
able to
was
score
good.
himself a few tries. Also got those few turnovers. So, a couple of those guys in the loose forward trio. It wouldn't take much for this Wallaby side to start getting on the front foot. It's just a couple like Nick White and Quade Cooper. I don't know what's happened since last year, but that didn't really feel the
No, it
same.
didn't pan out to what people expected. Yeah.
So what about, here's a big what if? What if they give Carter Gordon a chance as the starting number 10?
Oh, you think they'll give it to him like this early? I mean,
I'm not sure if they will, but Eddie Jones, if we saw what he did with Tom Hooper, putting him in the deep end for his debut, he said that he quite enjoyed seeing what Carter Gordon did at the end of the game. So, maybe
true.
you
It's
go
true.
Quade might have come back a little bit too early from his injury. Perhaps we give him a little bit of time later on in the game where he can start nailing those last minute kicks if they are needed, similar to the role that Nicolas Sanchez was playing for Argentina.
Yeah.
Although, yeah, I think the only thing he did was hurt his knee at one point and kick the ball out relatively quickly, unfortunately.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. I do think that the call of maybe Carter Gordon could be interesting because I mean, if you are to do it, within this rugby championship, it is probably against Argentina at home because that's probably going to suit him the best, in terms of being, at home, just being in good environments really that he's been, he's kind of used to. I mean, I wouldn't mind it really. I mean, I actually like Carter Gordon a lot, guys. So I'd actually rate it if they actually went with him. But do you think they would still go with Nick White then, like with Carter Gordon, or do you think they would go maybe I don't know, give a try to Tim McDermott, even like Ryan Lonergan, he didn't get a shot. Like, what even they do with there?
See, because Nick White didn't really play too well, did he? Unfortunately, he just seemed to be under too much pressure. And when they did have
Yeah,
that little bit of momentum, a majority of the time he was kicking it away. They'd be on
exactly.
attack, and then Marika Korombedi would go up and try and get the high ball or something along those lines. Maybe the Wallabies won it, and then he'd kick it to the left wing where Marika Korombedi would have been, but he was lying down in the
Exactly.
breakdown. So it was just kind of giving the position back. And when you're only getting about 30% of position in the game, you cannot afford to be giving up that little tiny bit that you have to then allow the Springboks to have another attack. So, I mean, I don't know whether or not they go with two young players in there as the combo, but maybe similar to what we saw for the ABs, how they went with Aaron Smith and Damian McKenzie, that slightly new combination to see if it would work. That might be what they do with Carter Gordon. The chances of him starting are probably pretty slim, but it is Eddie Jones. We don't really
Yeah,
know
you never know.
sometimes what he's going to do. I know that Marcus Smith, he gave him a lot of opportunities as a young player. So who knows, maybe Carter Gordon could get that same crack.
Well, I like it. I like it. But yeah, we'll then move on then, of course, towards the second game of this round one, which was the Pumas versus the All Blacks. I mean, again, you could say a similar scoreline to what we saw in the first game. I think it was 41 points to 12 at the end of the day. I mean, we were a bit unsure if it was 12 or 10 because the last conversion wasn't. it didn't look like it went through the post, but they did count it, so it was 41 points to 12. But yeah, I mean, just from my perspective overall, I think of the game, I really do think the All Blacks took control. I think just the majority of that first half. I don't think the Pumas really had an answer. And the thing is that the Pumas really just gave the ball away a lot, and that kind of allowed the All Blacks to kind of just persevere and just kind of get the possession back, win a few penalties in the process, move the field, and then just score a try with it. So it was really kind of a one-sided game, you could say, in terms of the first half, but really more in the second. I think both sides are definitely more in it. I mean, Pumas definitely got their way back into the game, kind of allow the momentum to kind of be a bit more balanced. And yeah, no, I thought it was a good game overall to watch, because I think you can definitely say there's a lot of lessons to be learned. But I mean, what do you think overall from both sides? Do you think it was a good game to watch, or do you think it was really just one-sided traffic?
It looked like it was going to be when we watched that first half, and it was 31-0 at halftime. But the second half, the Pumas impressed me, because they could have easily gone into their shell and pretty much had 31 points scored against them again in that second half. But they actually scored the same amount of points as the ABs in that second half. In fact, well, that kick was an interesting one, wasn't it? Because I actually saw like some written commentary of it, and they were like, Emiliano Boffelli misses away to the left, 2 points for Argentina. And I was like, how does that work? But
they felt that bad for them.
He got it, So on the technicality, I guess it works out. And at the moment on the championship, in terms of the order of the teams, I think I'm sitting not too badly for the ABs in second, Springboks in first. But of course, still plenty of time left in the championship, 2 more games. And yeah, the All Blacks, I think that they definitely came out in this game with a fire lit underneath them. They seemed to have a plan that they wanted to execute, and with getting 3 tries in the first 11 minutes, certainly seemed like they were executing it pretty well. Pumas, the thing that hurt them, I think, was not playing a lot of rugby recently, because we've got to remember New Zealand have been playing Super Rugby Pacific all throughout the last few months. But if you're an Argentine player whose side got knocked out early in the Gallagher Premiership or in the top 14, like some of these boys hadn't played rugby for maybe 1 or 2 months.
That's true.
I think that the rust was there in the first half. The second half, they seemed to start gelling, started finding their momentum a little bit more, and became more like the Pumas that we did see from last year. But yeah, I think it was just that slow start really hurt them. But the ABs, they'll be looking forward to their game up against the Boks next week. I think we might even see quite a few changes for what the All Blacks put out there on the field. But yeah, it should be good. Hopefully it's a close game. Last time I said that, it was a one-sided affair. So
Exactly. But yeah, I mean, I guess in terms of like the players overall, I mean, from both sides, really. I mean, I thought the All Blacks, I mean, there's a lot of players that stood out. I mean, for me personally, I mean, the 3 I mentioned within my channel was McKenzie, Beauden Barrett, and Sam Cane as the players who stood out. I believe you also mentioned, reminded me really of Jordy Barrett and how well he played, actually. So I actually did look back at the highlights, and I thought, yeah, you know what, he deserves actually a lot of credit, because, he got a try to his name. He was pretty much all over the field. He got, he won ball. I think he won one of the penalties actually in the breakdown. So yeah, like he definitely was all over the place. So I think those are definitely the 4 players in my eye that stood out from a All Black perspective. I guess from a Pumas perspective, I mean, there's not any of the big names really kind of stood out. I mean, I wouldn't say Boffelli was there. He didn't really have the game you'd expect from him. Matera, I didn't think was like, yeah, he did bits, but he wasn't like, his usual self really. I mean, I'm trying to think, was there a player? I mean, like, I guess Caceres had a pretty good game. I thought he did pretty well to kind of like control the game. I thought whenever I forget his first name, but the other Caceres really, I think it's Mateus Caceres. He on the left wing, I thought he was actually pretty impressive, because whenever he had the ball, actually, he was able to kind of gain a few meters in the process every single time. So I thought I was pretty impressed by him. And I guess, I mean, what am I on about? I have to say Julian Montoya. I think he's like probably the main guy, actually. I completely forgot about him. He had a good game overall. And of course, it was great to see, Karevi obviously get the try at the end. So, I think overall, I mean, there's players there who had moments in the game, but they weren't able to be consistent. There weren't consistency. So, yeah, I mean, what about you? Were there any players that I haven't said that kind of stood out?
Yeah, I agree that Julian Montoya was pretty strong. Pablo Matera, I thought at his moments, that first initial charge down seemed like the Pumas were really in it for the long haul, but then unfortunately it was just a little stint. But Rodrigo Bruni, I feel like he didn't go too badly at number 8 for Argentina. I feel like he was putting in a few big hits. But I think the biggest hit of the day definitely goes to Sam Cane for that big tackle. And not just that one. Did you see what happened after the game, Tim?
No, I didn't see, no.
Well, this is an interesting scenario, but I mean, we can either talk about it now or maybe after this part about the All Blacks game, but pretty much Sam Cane got himself in a little bit of trouble for foot tripping a pitch invader who ran onto the field after the game.
Really? Oh, I didn't even see that.
But it makes the question come to mind, why is he getting in trouble if there's a pitch invader? Like, surely it's the pitch invader who should get in trouble. But the interesting part of it is after the pitch invader was taken down, he ran straight up to the Argentine side. So, it was just pretty much security didn't get him. Yeah. But then Sam Cane afterwards then had a hangout session with the guy who he foot tripped and the guy's friends. So would that not entice people to try and pitch invade for the chance of meeting the All Blacks or chance of, it seems like he's been rewarded for running onto the field.
It's pretty cool. Let's get on the pitch.
Yeah, like, it's a weird scenario, but I feel like Sam Cane shouldn't have to apologize for foot tripping a guy. And tell you what, he foot tripped him pretty good. He got him smack down on the face.
I'll look after this. But that's the thing is, like, I mean, there's nothing. I mean, in my head, maybe this is a bit selfish of me, but I was like, oh, maybe this means that he may not play the next game if this goes for some reason if this happens. But I mean, it's just a foot trip, so I mean, if they do anything, because of that, I mean, it's just outrageous. But I guess in terms of the lessons to be learned, I guess from both sides. I mean, what would you say is kind of the lessons to be learned? Because I mean, I know there's a lot to. In my opinion, I think the big one for Argentina was that they just need to hold on to possession a lot more because they kept on giving away the ball so easily. I mean, I remember they won the ball in the breakdown and then they kicked it out on the full, and then the All Blacks just won it back. So I was like, what are you doing? Like, just hold on to the ball, play a bit. So. I mean, what do you think? Like, what are the lessons to be learned?
Yeah, I think possession's going to be a big one, but it's not just for Argentina, it's for the Wallabies as well. Like, next week, both sides having about 30% possession. I'm trying to work out where the other 40% is going to go in that game, whether or not one of the sides steps up and says, yeah, we'll take it all, or whether it's going to be a bit more of an aerial, maybe kicking battle for a bit, try and get... Because even the kicking, to a certain extent, wasn't really coming off for either side when it came to just kicking it down the middle of the field. Seems to still have a few errors scattered throughout it. So for the Argentines, I think it's just going to be continue with what they were doing in the second half because it was working. Like, at the end of the day, they scored the same amount of points as what the All Blacks did in that second 40 minutes. And after the way that the All Blacks started, I don't think people would so much say as the All Blacks played badly in that second half. I think it was just more that the Pumas were able to then find their feet. And
agreed.
Yeah, the two games next week are going to be very hard to predict.
I can't wait. I can't wait.
Two very good games.
Yeah, I mean, I guess just going off the last question, really, just for this is now just, I guess, what mean then? What will really happen now with both these sides going into next week? Because, I mean, I guess from an Argentinian standpoint, I mean, do you think they'll make a lot of changes? Because I can't really think if there's going to be a lot of changes really going against the Wallabies. I mean, unless they want to go with maybe like Nicolas Sanchez maybe to start. I mean, that's probably the only one I can think of that maybe could have made an impact, or could maybe, instead of making an impact, maybe, start straight away, and maybe that's the route that maybe go with. But I don't know. Maybe I'm trying to think, like, maybe they can shift Boffelli maybe to one of the wingers, and then because I think Boffelli was actually playing as a 15 in that game, which he doesn't actually normally do, by the way, guys, because he is normally situated as one of the 11 or 14, and the Pumas actually do pretty well in that sense whenever he's in those positions. So I think that what they could do is maybe go with one of the Buffelli there. Then I'd probably go with Caceres once again, and then you probably go with. I mean, I would like to see it if they could do it, but maybe go with like Santiago. You go with Caceres, maybe bring him back into the 15 and allow Nicolas Sanchez maybe to be the 10. Maybe that's something they could do. But I mean, do you think they'll make any changes? Because I can't really think if there's another one they can make.
I think that maybe in the loose forward trio, they might go with Facundo Eze as number 7 rather than Juan Martin Gonzalez.
It's a good
just
shot.
Because I feel like Juan Martin Gonzalez last year was a little bit stronger when he was playing 6 rather than playing number 7. So they might look at changing that and give Facundo Eze a chance there. In the front row, I mean, I don't think they need to change too much. Sordoni, to a certain extent, I would say, is probably another player who had a decent contest for himself, managed to get himself over the try line, and also just in the scrums, of course, it's hard to,
But against Taro Lomax, because Taro Lomax got the better of him literally throughout the scrums every single time. So maybe that's something which they can maybe, I don't know, maybe switch him out, because I think who's his replacement? I think is it Eduardo Bello? I think it is.
I believe so. I think who else have they got? Have they got Santiago Medrano, or is he missing?
I think he's missing for the meantime, but he could be available maybe for the next game. But yeah, but they could stick with that really for the front row. So I don't think there's really any changes besides that what we've already said. But I mean, from an All Black perspective, what do you think? I mean, what changes do you think they'll make going into the Bok game?
I think it will heavily depend on injuries, because of course I'd love to see Lester Nuku or a Will Jordan or Mark Talia maybe make their return.
I hope Mark plays. I really want to see Mark Talia versus the Springboks, because he really is like, I mean, even like Narwa, I'd say as well, because I did mention this previously, but like they both remind me of like kind of like how Springbok wingers really. That's kind of like the way they play. So I really want to see Mark Talia versus the Boks. I mean, jeez, I mean, Talia versus Mpimpi, like, that would be such a good battle. Oh, I'd love to see that. But I mean, what do you think there'll be any other changes?
I think that the locks, Josh Lord, it was nice to see him back out there for the ABs, but I believe that that's either going to be Retallick or Whitelock, who then get themselves that other spot up against the Springboks. The question is whether Scott Barrett will stay at number 4, or whether they'll try and transition him back to blindside flanker like they have a little bit in the past. But yeah, I think they've built a foundation. Dane Cole's probably going to get changed out as well, although he did play pretty well in this game, I thought.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair. I mean, like, I guess like if you're talking about the All Blacks, I mean, I guess you go with the normal. I mean, the big question for me really is if they're going to go with Mwanga to start or McKenzie, because I really thought McKenzie had a great game, and when Mwanga actually came onto the field, they actually just weren't. I don't know. He wasn't able to make the impact of what you kind of expected. But I guess if you're playing a side like the Boks, maybe Mwanga is better suited to play against them, because I mean he's someone who can just kind of run around players, and I think he's better at doing that than McKenzie. I think Mwanga is better at finding a gap, I think, in the defense than what McKenzie can do. But McKenzie, in my opinion, is still the better kicker in terms of finding gaps, like in terms of going for the 50-22. So it's a tough decision, that. But I think they will probably go with Mwanga there. But yeah, I think they'll probably stick with the same center combination as well, because I think Jordy Barrett and Reiko worked pretty well. I mean, they could maybe switch Reiko out, because I didn't actually think, I mean, maybe I'm wrong in saying this, guys, but I didn't think Reiko had, like, he didn't stand out in this game. I mean, I think he had the one moment early on in the game where I think it was one of the first try of the game, actually, where he broke the line, and then from there was able to kind of pass it towards Narwa, and then Narwa went in, and then a few phases later, I think it was Dane Coles who got the first try. But besides that, I can't really think of a moment where Reiko actually stood out. So maybe they go with someone like Brennan Enor there. Maybe even Dallas McLeod. You never know. I mean, they could make a lot of switches, but yeah, I think there's not really any other winger. I mean, like, I guess Lester Fananku is probably the big one, like you said, in terms of Caleb Clark. But again, that just depends on if there's an injury there or not. But yeah, I think that's kind of it, really, guys. I mean, I think that's kind of covered our review, you could say, of this round 1 of the Rugby Championship. Also, let us know in the comments, by the way, guys, what you think. I mean, were there any kind of takes there that you guys agree on, or maybe disagree? Let us know in the comments, of course. And definitely let us know in the comments who you think will win the Rugby Championship, because we actually didn't get to see that. We didn't actually ask you guys that last time. So let us know in the comments what you guys think in terms of who may win. But yeah, other than that, we'll leave it here. Obviously, thank you, of course, towards the Q lads for joining once again. Also, thank you to myself, of course. Thanks for joining. But anyway, guys, yeah, we'll see you guys next time.